Hey guys, so I wrote a couple articles about how both INFPs and INTPs use NI, and yes, I got that right. INFPs and INTPs use NI, not just INTJs and INFJs. And these articles I've posted down below. So we typically understand INFPs and INTPs as belonging to the SI-NE axis. And this certainly is the case in regards to the functions of that these types of values. So INTPs and INFPs value NI. But just like every type, INFPs and INTPs use NI in a certain way. So every function exists in the psyche of every type. It's a matter of how we use it. What kind of role does it play? And it plays a role, a similar role in both the INTP and INFP psyche. So in socionics, it's called the demonstrative function, which I'll speak a little bit about later. So here I'm going to give you a general gist of the idea and some thoughts on the matter, and I hope you can check out the articles later, which are down below, which I lay this down in depth. And NI is not a function that INFPs and INTPs value. However, it's a very strong function of both types, and this may be confusing to digest at first. So first, we need to understand the difference between strength and value. So NI is very strong, however, it is unvalued in the psyche of the INFP and INTP. So here's an analogy I used before. You could be very strong, that is very talented at the piano, and you can like the piano very much. So this is like how INTJs and INFJs use NI. They are strong at it and they love it. INFPs and INTPs, on the other hand, they're like the piano player who's very good at piano, but they don't like the piano. So this is how INFPs and INTPs use NI. So unlike the piano, NI is hardly a matter of choice in the INPs. So, with the piano, you could just move on to another instrument. You can learn how to play the clarinet or trombone or something else. But what is in our psyche remains in our psyche. You can't get away from these cognitive functions. They don't exist outside of ourselves. NI expresses itself in unconscious ways for both types. So this is a part of theory that's still very much in line with how MBTI interprets typology. And there's your first four functions, primary, secondary, tertiary, inferior. And then there are your shadow functions. So shadow meaning unconscious. And what is unvalued gets relegated into our unconscious because we don't want to consciously deal with it anymore, but they end up being expressed in different ways. And so in Socionics, there are four levels of strength, and this is what's called dimensionality in Socionics. This is something I'll talk about probably at another point. But the greater dimension of the function, the greater the strength. So 4D, four dimensionality, very strong. 3D is strong, 2D is weak, and 1D is very weak. So all 8 functions are categorized in these 4 levels of dimensionality. There's 2 per. And this is a concept I kind of explained. Actually, I kind of did explain this a little bit before, but anyway. However, the important thing to know is that NI is a 4D, 4-dimensional function for INPs, meaning it's very strong. Which means that we INPs, I'm an INFP, have superpowers in regards to NI. It is actually constantly on, but in the background. So Ben David and Victor Gulenko have both compared the function as a fish so submersed in the water it does not know it's surrounded by water. So we're submersed in NI. It has been shown to be very strong in cognitive function assessment tests, such as that of Dario-Nardi. So if you take Dario-Nardi's cognitive function test, INFPs and INTPs tend to score very high on NI. So what is NI? NI is a very strong sense of knowing. Um, and that lends itself to convergence in intuition rather than divergence like NE. So here's the difference. So you have NI is you're taking a bunch of ideas and then they get converged into this one thing, this one theory. Whereas NE takes this one theory and tries to make more and more and more ideas. And so it's divergent versus convergent. And the knowingness leads to this sense of convergent because it kind of knows how things kind of fit, right? So NE is what INFPs and INTPs, what we consciously value. So there's a preference for expansion of possibilities rather than limiting of possibilities, which NI does. So if you observe INJs, there's a conscious favoring of limiting possibilities. Each method has its pros and cons, whether you do this or you go out like that. None is better than the other. And surely, though, INFPs and INTPs are going to be annoyed by how INJs use NI, and INJs are going to be annoyed by how INPs use NE. However, what is covered in Socionics and not in MBTI is that INFPs and INTPs do well in NI. So, and it's actually stronger than NE for both types. So NI is a 4D function and NE is a 3D function for both INPs. Thus, there is a tendency to have a very strong NI that cannot be shut off, a very strong sense of knowingness that converges on how things will be or the significance of a specific perspective or idea that rises above others and is felt with clarity and conviction yet cannot be explained. This is NI. But the INFP and INTP will naturally fight this tendency and expand possibilities, expand the number of possible outcomes. And intuition is favored, which covers all objective possibilities. So at an unconscious and preconscious level, there's actually a very strong ability to uncover what will actually pan out with a subjective intuition. This is NI. But this is stifling to the INFP and INTP, which is viewed negatively. So they could get into a critical parent mode, as Dr. Beebe would call it. So when types who value NI express NI, like in INFJ or INTJ, insisting on one or a narrowed down set of possibilities are felt very strongly with a subjective intuition, a strong sense of knowing. This appears dogmatic and limiting to the INFP and INTP who wants to consider more options. So everything needs to be considered. Possibilities are instead limited by TI-FI, things that have to, ideas have to follow FI values or TI principles first. So INTPs and INFPs may consider ideas outside of principle and value, but eventually the ideas must come back to principle or value. The INJs NI valuing is viewed with suspicion because there's no grounding of these obscure NI thoughts in an introverted judgment function, TI or FI kind of framework. But INPs experience these NI thoughts very powerfully in themselves. They're kept private, especially when alone. They'll experience intense bouts of NI, which kind of feels like this sucking in of almost like these psychotic thoughts, and converging on, and it's felt with conviction about like what they know. These intuitions are felt with in a kind of more NI kind of way. So INTJs and INFJs are okay with talking about their intuitions with confidence, even at the expense of appearing psychotic. INFPs and INTPs have intuitive perceptions that actually appear psychotic, but they don't really mention about them. Instead, we use NI but try to explicate our ideas from NI in terms of NE and our first function, whether it be TI or FI. So as I said, INPs have a very strong NI, but won't let NI stand alone. What comes to them must be grounded in principle or value. If not, it must be presented. If not principle or value, TI or FI, it must be presented as an objective possibility among other possibilities. So it doesn't seem like dogmatic. Um, so, okay, INTPs and INPs can be dogmatic about TI and FI. So when they're dogmatic, they're dogmatic about TI or FI, but not NI, at least not consciously. So INFPs and INTPs have this sense of knowingness, and it's not trusted. They tend to be skeptical of ideas presented in such a fashion. So examples would be like woo ideas, such as psychoanalysis or spiritual psychic claims, things that involve a subjective knowing, are viewed with suspicion. And these are only examples. So of course there are individual INTPs or INFPs who would embrace these ideas or enter these fields, and INFJs and INTJs are not, they may not be into psychoanalysis, or they might be skeptical of these spiritual psychic claims. But I'm saying there's tendency, or I'm talking about how the field is like. So both fields, like psychoanalysis and spiritual psychic stuff, involve a subjective intuition that is NI. Tend to be very NI heavy fields. Of course, there's other NI heavy fields. So they reek of a certain kind of seriousness in intuition that don't fly to NE valuers. You could say that all introvert functions appear too serious to their extrovert counterparts. So in socionics, INTPs and INFPs use NI as a demonstrative function. They're very good at it, and they think it's good to practice the function time to time, but ultimately view it as boring or kind of a joke. So when talking to INFPs and INTPs, you could see this tendency to kind of mock it. You could feel a bit of avoidance of NI. So NE's, what NE does is kind of just really BS stuff in kind of a silly way, more innovative kind of way. Kind of you have all these half-baked ideas, and then moving on to other half-baked ideas. So it feels more lighter, and to the INFP and INTP more pleasant than NI. But they experience NI and they don't feel it they don't experience it pleasantly. When NI ideas are zoned in too much, it could be viewed as unpleasant to them, so they try to escape by going into NE mode. So it is after some development that INFPs and INTPs would have an appreciation of intuition in a truly NI kind of way. So as Dr. Beebe put it, it's no longer viewed as a witch or senex, and instead becomes a wise man and wise woman. So it's like when, like Luke Skywalker, who's an INFP, speaks to the hallucination of Obi-Wan Kenobi, who's an INFJ. So yes, you're trusting your inner woo-woo. And I'm not saying believe this is necessarily like spiritual claims, but just NI general stuff. Trusting your inner subjective intuition, even when it appears kind of serious or kind of ridiculous. So it's good to counterbalance your NE, because NE will keep coming up with more and more options, and it will paralyze you. So those strong INFPs and INTPs even keep diverting themselves and doubt themselves. When they got this NI in their disposal to have a good sense of the best way to go forward and provide a vision for life. So NE causes doubt and diversion, and then NI knows the best way to go forward. So it could actually save time and help you focus your day, because you have an inner knowing of how to proceed, instead of having to consider like a million options. So anyway, check out the articles, and they're down below.